All right, joining me now, former President Donald Trump's chief of staff, the great Mick Mulvaney. Mick, thanks for joining me. Listen, I always mention this. You've been in Congress. You have had a lot of positions in the federal government, including chief of staff to the president. I first want to ask you, it seems odd that Merrick Garland didn't tell the White House that he was going to give a press statement today. What does that mean to you as a former chief of staff?
Yeah, Sean, it means it could mean a couple of different things. First of all, it could mean that they're just incompetent. Again, one of the great rules in Washington is don't ever assume a conspiracy where sheer incompetence will explain things. And they could just be running a very poor operation. But they could have done it on purpose to try and insulate Biden from the potential political blowback. Keep in mind, there's a lot of Democrats who are not happy about this, that if they went in here to just get documents and they don't have a smoking gun, this could really bounce back and hurt the Democrats in the November midterms. I mean, there was a CNN legal analyst who went on TV and said that this was a dangerous search if it's just for documents. So if the DOJ knows, or at least suspects, they may have sort of made a political mistake, they might try to be distancing themselves from the White House, or at least allowing the White House to claim that distance. Either way, it's not a well-functioning Department of Justice. It's the first thing I picked up on today when we saw that press conference.
You know, you were a Republican congressman. You served with the Republican president. I was a Republican congressman back in the day. I talk to people, and they are outraged in the inequity of treatment by the FBI and the DOJ. And as Edward Lawrence just mentioned, I mean, again, the classic example is Hillary Clinton. Not only did she have a private server with classified information on that server, and her home wasn't raided, she bleach-bitted her devices to make sure that they couldn't actually search them. So she thwarted the investigation. And nothing was done like this to Hillary Clinton. But Donald Trump, again, gets unfair treatment and the power treatment from justice. What do you say?
Well, think about it. I mean, the New York Times ran some very salacious photographs earlier this week of pieces of paper in a toilet saying that Donald Trump had thrown these in there. They look like handwritten notes of members of Congress names. But the whole of Washington, D.C. and the whole sort of left-wing corporate media is apoplectic about this. Hillary Clinton did the digital equivalent of sitting in the basement and setting these documents on fire. Can you imagine how the New York Times would respond if they had pictures of Donald Trump setting boxes of documents on fire? The double standard here, Sean, I know we complain about it, and I know, if there was no double standard in the media, there'd be no standards at all for most of those folks. But it's real, and it undermines the credibility that institutions like the Department of Justice and the FBI had. Look, I think that Merrick Garland tried today to sort of counter that by saying he's going to seek to unseal the warrants, the receipt. That's great. What he didn't say was, and we're going to show you the affidavits that we used to get the search warrant in the first place. It's those affidavits, by the way, that they lied about to get the FISA permission to spy on Trump in 2016. So it's sort of one step out of 10 that was necessary today by Merrick Garland. I think they know they have a problem, but they're not doing very much to fix it.
Well, they have a problem if there's an appearance of impropriety. I mean, so half the country thinks that this is unfair. They have a problem, and they should come out and go, listen, there's real meat on this bone. This is different than the examples that conservatives give on the unfair treatment, and this is why. But President Trump posted on Truth Social saying, quote, my attorneys and representatives were cooperating fully, and very good relationships had been established. The government could have had whatever they wanted if we had it. They asked us to put an additional lock on a certain area. Done. Everything was fine, better than that of most previous presidents. And then, out of nowhere and with no warning, Mar-A-Lago was raided at 6:30 in the morning by a very large number of agents, and even safecrackers. They got way ahead of themselves. Crazy. Do you think Donald Trump, Mick, with these statements, is able to, push the narrative that he, again, is treated unfairly? Does that work for him? Or does the liberal media kind of swarm the airwaves and make Donald Trump look like a criminal?
Listen, I've been critical of the president at times. I've been supportive of the president at times. My job as chief of staff was to call things like I see them, and I've tried to do that since I've left the administration. I think Trump has got every complaint in the world here, and it appears to be valid. You've done search warrants before, back when you were a federal prosecutor. What do you have to show? Probable cause that the evidence is not only there and tied to a crime, but that it could be gone soon. It could be imminently destroyed or moved. That's why that affidavit is so important. What did the federal government see or hear or tell this court that said we have to have this stuff today? Because Trump was right. At least everything we've seen publicly shows Trump to be right, that they were cooperating. And if they had asked him, look, we think there's another 10 boxes in addition to the 15 that we took, why would he give them to him? If he was going to destroy documents, why did he he do it 6 months ago or a year ago? This stinks. It just does. And I don't want it to, because I'm a conservative and I want to believe in institutions. I want to believe in the fairness of law enforcement. But the DOJ is dropping the ball here, and they need to fix it quickly.
Well, and let's talk about the FBI dropping the ball. I want to play this clip from Merrick Garland when he was talking about defending the Department of Justice. Take a listen.
Let me address recent unfounded attacks on the professionalism of the FBI and Justice Department agents and prosecutors. I will not stand by silently when their integrity is unfairly attacked. The men and women of the FBI and the Justice Department are dedicated, patriotic public servants.
Mick, good for him for defending the FBI and the DOJ. I disagree with what they're doing, but as the head of the DOJ, which is also the head of the FBI, good for him defending those who work in those institutions. But where in the hell was he to defend the Supreme Court when they've been getting attacked, death threats, threats of harm, protesters outside their homes violating the law? The man's been silent. So again, he'll defend his own agencies, but you have a third branch of government that's being attacked by the public, and the guy says nothing and doesn't enforce the law in regard to those protesters.
Yeah, left-wing protesters lobbed two mortars into a federal office building in Portland, Oregon over the 4th of July. Did you hear Merrick Garland go on TV talking about defending the integrity of the system? No, he didn't. There was one word he used there. Sean, you're right. He says exactly what he has to say. If you were in the position, you'd say the same thing about the people working for you. There was one word there that was wrong, however. He said unfounded allegations. Right. That's not true. There's a foundation for these things. There's a history for these things. There's a track record on FISA. There's a track record on Hunter Biden's laptop. There's a track record in the recent past of the Department of Justice treating Republicans differently than Democrats. I don't think he likes it any more than I do, but he has to do something about it. And just coming out and saying we're gonna seek to make the search warrant public doesn't do it. He has to be so far beyond reproach in this particular circumstance. He's not coming after you and me. He's coming after the former president of the United States. This is the highest bar he could possibly meet, and they are not meeting it right now.
But Mick, he'll go after anybody. I mean, this is the same guy who said, I'm going to go after parents who are going to school boards and protesting CRT and transgender, education in their school system. He called them domestic terrorists. So the guy has no clean hands as he has a conversation about trust us. We're going to follow the law and we're beyond reproach. Give me a break. You're a political hack.
Grassley's got a whistleblower, it says, giving him evidence that the misinformation campaign out of the FBI was orchestrated at the very highest levels. Jim Jordan has whistleblowers telling him that they're seeing that the FBI is cooking the books, and in their term, padding the data on domestic terrorism in order to make conservative activists look bad. There's a bunch of rotten things at the FBI. I think Garland knows it. I really do. I hope that he does. His reputation would suggest that he does, but he's got to do something about it. And just coming out and saying, I approve this and I'm going to show you the search warrants doesn't even begin to scratch the surface.
You give him more credit than I give him, Mick. But by the way, I got to say, a guy who can get out of the pool an hour ago and be ready for TV with me, very grateful. You look good after swimming in the pool.
I put a tie on for you, Sean. You know that doesn't happen every single time.
It doesn't, but no jacket still. But I appreciate you joining me, Mick. Always smart. Thank you.